Welcome back to another episode of I Can Do That. I'm David Lyell, and we have a few more techniques on the table saw that we want to share with you. We're going to talk about how to make angled cuts by tilting your blade. We're going to talk about how to make tenons for mortise and tenon joinery, and we're going to talk about how to cut dados with a dado stack. So sit back and enjoy. All right, we're going to get into angled cuts now, and there's a few things to consider as we look at the blade and the way that this is set up to consider before we do that. The blade that probably came with your saw is a combination blade. It's perfect for making ripping cuts and cross-cutting boards. And that's exactly what we need from our blade. Another thing to consider as you look at your setup is whether or not your riving knife is tilting with your blade. If it is not, you can't use it. So you need to take it off. Ours is a true riving knife that is tilting with the blade, and that's good news. So this particular table saw tilts with a lever that releases the whole trunnion assembly, which is where the blade is mounted, and it tilts freely based on where you pull it to. And then you flip this lever back up and it locks. It's a great system, and it's very quick to make your angle adjustment, but a lot of table saws will actually have a second screw over here that you crank, and it'll move the blade perhaps more precisely, but this works great as well. So we've got our blade set at 45 degrees on this scale, and we're going to bring the saw blade back into the table and put our insert back on. We are going to use a speed square to verify that this is at 45 degrees. You could use a combination square. And actually, there's a couple great digital readouts that are available that you zero on the table and then you put it on your blade, and as it tilts, it gives you a precise angle compared to the table, which is great. But for this, we're going to use this speed square, and you just sneak it up to the blade on this side, and I can see that there is no light coming through that gap between the blade and the square. So I think we're good, and we're at 45 degrees pretty accurately. Now that we have our blade set to 45 and verified with the square, I want to show you a couple other things to consider. When we're making a rip cut that is very thin, if you were to want to cut a 45 right here, and you were going to run your board this way, if you do not have a zero clearance insert here, there is a chance that if your good side is thinner than the gap between the blade and the throat plate, it could fall in, and that is very dangerous. You also want to keep the good piece on this side of the blade over here. If you were to try and keep the good piece on this side of the blade, if you were to perhaps cut it this way, there's a chance that you could get some kickback and you wouldn't be able to push through the waste on this side. So you don't want to do that either. So keep your good side here and do not make a rip that is too thin. All right, we're going to get ready to make our first angled rip cut on here. I'm going to grab my safety protection and make sure that you have your push stick close by and ready for that. And we're going to go ahead and give this a go. And so we have our first bevel cut here, and it's a nice 45 degree. And you just want to be conscious of any kind of wobbling that you had as you're pushing it through, but this looks pretty good. Now we're going to move on to making a cross cut with the blade angled this way. So we're going to take our fence off and put it in our storage. And last time we showed you how to run the board in this miter track. As we get ready to make this cut, we're going to need to move the miter gauge to the other slot so that our good piece can again be on this side of the blade, avoiding any kind of kickback or burning that's going to go on this side. And this is actually a good illustration of why you would not want your keeper piece on this side of the blade. You'll notice that there was a little part that was not cut off because I could not push this piece all the way through. This side, we're looking great. We have 45 along this face and this one. We're going to go ahead and get started with making some dados. One of the easiest ways to make dados is to use what we call a dado stack. We picked up this set from Woodcraft, and it's a Freud set, and it's about $80, and it makes this process very easy. On the chart that's included with the stack, it prescribes exactly how many blades, chippers, spacers, and shims that you need to achieve a dado. One of the things that you need to know is that not all plywood is exactly 3/4 of an inch. Plywood like this is normally 23/32. MDF is almost always exactly 3/4 of an inch. We can follow our chart that includes blade A, blade B, 3 chippers, and 2 spacers, and that'll give us 3/4 of an inch stack. So let's get this installed. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for this video and the I Can Do That series. Woodcraft is the perfect place to get all of your wood, your tools, your supplies, everything you need to get started on a woodworking project. They have experts in the store and online to help you get you what you need. Titebond is what we use in this shop. It's great for all of your projects. They have a complete line of woodworking glues for all of your needs. Thank you for your support and enjoy the rest of the video. The first thing we're going to do is replace our throat plate with one that's compatible with dado stacks. We had to go buy this one over at Woodcraft, and it allows you to install a dado stack up to 15/16. And so you can see when the blade is up, including the blade, we're going to be in good shape. So we're going to take this out, make sure your saw is unplugged, and we'll raise this up all the way, so that we have good access to the arbor. We need to lower the riving knife all of the way down so that we can use this dado stack. This saw has a stop so that you can loosen the arbor nut very easily. One of the tricks is to not drop the arbor nut down into the saw. Once you do this, you'll find out why it's possible. And then there's always a washer as well. And so we'll take out our blade and get these installed. The recipe for the 3/4 stack is 1 blade, then a chipper, then a spacer, another chipper. And one of the things you want to keep in mind is to not stack all your chippers at one place, so you can kind of space them out this way. Another spacer, another chipper, I'm going to space that a little bit, and then the next blade. All right, so let's put these on the saw in the same order that I just showed you. Spacer, rotate a little bit to maintain our balance. Another spacer, another chipper. I'll bring that over a little bit, and then the last blade. And by now, you're going to be running low on room on your arbor. You'll find that once you have your 3/4 stack on, that the stock washer is just too big to put the nut back on. So we're going to use this nut that was included with our dado plate. This is thinner and will let us get a couple revolutions of that nut on. And it has a flat that you need to match up like that. Then the nut. And this will just about max out our arbor. And so it's going to be tight, but as long as you can get a couple turns on here. All right, I feel good about that. All right, so let's grab a piece of wood and make our first cut. I have 2 pieces of MDF here. We set our stack up for 3/4 of an inch. MDF is always spot on 3/4 of an inch. So one of the things that I wanted to show you as far as setting your height for dados, that in general, I would say that we can set our dado stack to half the thickness of your board. So we're going to set our dado stack to 3/8 of an inch. And you can see this up here. With that set, we are going to run our board straight over the stack like this. This is not a through cut, and a dado stack is taking out a lot of wood at once, and so there's a lot of force coming back at you and slightly pushing the wood up. And so remember, the motion that you're making as you push is kind of diagonal towards the fence and forward because it's going to want to pull. And you can even use a push stick or push pad if that makes you feel more comfortable to get that downward pressure. So let's go ahead and make this cut. And so now we can check out our fit. Line these up. The front goes in, but you know what? This is a little tight. And so this is where the experimentation comes in with the dado stack. It's really, really close, but included with our dado stack are some shims of varying thickness. They're very thin, but it'll give us just enough wiggle room to make this fit a little less tight and a little more of an appropriate fit. And so I would add one more shim to this and you'd be good to go. Another way to use this dado stack is to make a rabbet. So if you move your fence over and you run your board this way, you can actually create a rabbet that's great for making boxes and casework. And so you would just run it over the blade this way. You don't even have to use the whole stack while making a rabbet, but you can set up a large stack like this and get your rabbets dialed in that way with the fence. We're going to introduce you to mortise and tenon joinery now. Mortise and tenons are a very strong way to connect 2 boards perpendicular to each other. Here I have a mortise already milled in this board. It is 2 1/4 inch long, it is 1/4 inch wide, and 1/2 inch deep. So now we need to create a board that will fit into this mortise. The part that fits in is called a tenon, and that's what we're going to be making now. The first thing we need to do is set the thickness of the tenon. And again, our mortise is 1/4 inch wide. So we need to take material off this way, creating a cheek that is going to fit in there, and off this side that will fit into there. And so for our situation, we'll have 1/4 inch off of both sides. So I can go ahead and set my combination square to 1/4 inch and set my dado stack to that height. And so with the ruler on this side, I'm able to bring the blade up just until it touches this face. We also need to set the length of the tenon, and we're going to do that with our miter gauge. I've gone ahead and added an auxiliary fence to this, and we're going to use a stop block to set the depth exactly the same on both pieces. So I have a little block of wood and a clamp. I'm going to loosely set that for now, and I'm going to come in and mark 1/2 inch on this for my depth. You can bring that around. And as you approach the blade, you can rotate this, make sure you're unplugged, until you find the outside of this blade and loosen up your stop block and push that until it's perfect. Tighten up your stop block. And so at this point, I'll be milling a 1/4 inch up and a 1/2 inch into this board. That will create the cheek to go into my tenon. So we're going to clear the table and get ready to make this cut. Don the safety gear and let's do this. So I've made the first 2 passes, and this is a good time to check your progress. I'm hoping that I actually cut this a little heavy so that we can sneak up on this fit. And I did. So right now, this is too tight, and so I'm going to adjust my blade up a little bit and make a pass on both sides so that this tenon remains centered in the board. All right, I'm going to put on my safety gear again, and we'll try this again. This is a pretty good fit. Now you'll notice that the ends of this mortise are rounded because we made them on the router. There are 2 ways you can address this. You can either round the ends of your tenon or cut the tenon short of your rounds. Because the length of our mortise is 2.5 round to round, I want to shoot for making the width of my tenon 2 3/8. Now I can set this here because we've already established the cheek depth, and now we're just cutting up on this tenon. We're going to shoot for 5/16 so that we'll fit nicely into that hole. Okay, and we're ready to make our cut. At this point, if everything went okay, we're going to have a tenon that fits. There we are. With a little persuasion, that'll go right in. We've completed our mortise and tenon joinery, we've done dados, and we've cut bevels by angling the blade on the table saw. There's a lot you can do with this set of tools, so join us next time on Popular Woodworking's I Can Do That.